Alright guys, welcome back to the shop. So today we're going to be taking a look at the prototyping I've done for the backpack we're going to be getting into well, tomorrow actually. And so what I'm really excited to show you here is kind of the different stages that I've already gone through. Now all this prototyping has taken place before I thought I was going to start making these videos, and I decided that as soon as I started making these videos, I kind of wanted to get caught up on some of the projects that I've already done. So we're going to kind of take a look at the stuff that I've already done, and that way when we actually get into the project tomorrow, it'll make a little bit more sense as to kind of where some of the certain ideas and decisions have come from. So this pile of parts is everything we've got so far. Now some of these were prototype pieces, some of them were initial construction pieces, and some of them were just trial and error things. So we're gonna start off from kind of going through the most basic parts here. This green canvas bag is basically all of our generic shapes of the pattern that we're gonna be making. So when you make a bag pattern or you're working on the design of a bag, you always think about it in these little 2D planes. So in this case, on this bag, I wish I had a drawing, but I really am not good at drawing, so it wouldn't make any more sense than me trying to explain it. But basically we have, I'm trying to think of it total, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 panels, and then a lid that's going to be going on top. So when you're thinking about all these different panels on this bag, you're thinking about them as each of their own individual flat assemblies, and they can be made up as many different parts and pieces as you need. Some of the parts of this bag are going to get very complicated, as you guys will see in tomorrow's video, but in this case, what I wanted to figure out is if the overall shape of the bag was going to come together the way that I expected. So all this is taking our main assembly pieces, so our side panels in this case, our front top panel here, our lower front panel here, our bottom panel, and then our back panel, and just taking the general shape of those pieces, or what would be the final sizing of them, stitching them all together, following the 3/8 seam allowance that I planned for, and seeing if sewing all that together actually gives me the plan or the shape of a bag that I want. And so when I did this, I was actually very impressed that it all came together pretty nicely. Now I did learn one thing when sewing this together, and that a big thing is I have to make sure I notch my my front panel, my full front panel assembly. That way we get a little bit more of the angular shape that I want here. So the main idea for this bag is that we have this side panel where the back is just a straight line. We have a nice 90-degree corner at the bottom, comes up at a 90-degree corner in the front, and then the top here, I believe it's like, actually, I have no idea what the angle is. I think I just kind of picked an angle that would look good, so I have no idea what it is, but it's just meant to have a slight taper backwards, and that just adds a little bit more shape to the overall bag. So it's one of the things I'm trying to experiment with more, is adding more complex shapes to my bags. So that's kind of what this showed me. And you can see here, I did screw up a lot. We've got a lot of these like raw canvas edges showing. Overall, this thing doesn't look good, but it's not meant to be. What this is meant to do is just show me the overall shape. So then along with that, I also made a quick prototype of the lid. So again, with the lid, I'm trying to do a little bit more of a complex assembly where we're making it out of 4 panels. And so we've got top, front, and side panels. And again, it too also has a little bit of angular shape to it. We've got this nice little curved shape to the front. And yeah, overall, it works out really nice. As you sit it on top, you can see that everything just kind of fits the shape of the bag that I have in my brain. So one of the problems I run into is that I'm a very bad designer of things, because the problem is I can't do like a lot of designers do and grab a sketchbook, draw out what I want to make, because for me it doesn't connect. I can't make that connection between what's in my brain and that piece of paper. I've tried it a lot, and in the case of this bag, I probably could sketch it out, because now that I've thought about the idea more and it's a little bit more ingrained in my brain, I could probably make it work. But typically what I do is I have an idea and I hold that idea in my brain, and then as I'm designing these things, I'm designing them based off of that drawing that is quite literally in my brain. So I know it sounds a little bit ridiculous, but right now I can see exactly how this bag looks in its final form in my brain. And so what I'm trying to do in this designing or this planning stage is as I make pieces, as I work around what I'm doing, even when I was just at the computer putting together the paper patterns, what I'm doing at that point is I'm just trying to figure out how to make the pieces that come together to then make the bag that matches what is in my brain. So again, the trick is for me is there's no point going out and trying to draw down these designs and putting together these different ideas, because I already have a very complex drawing up here. It just sucks that I can't show it to people because, again, it's trapped in my brain. So anyway, what that means is that when I'm trying to design these things, it does take more time and patience to kind of create the things in reality. So when I'm going through and I'm designing different parts of this bag, I have to go through and I have to make the actual piece and then look at it and go, does this fit what is in my brain? Sometimes it's a yes, sometimes it's a no. And sometimes the things that are in my brain don't actually work out in reality, which I've already had on this bag a couple times. So in that case, that's when we go back to the drawing board and kind of work on readapting the things that I've kind of already done. Now with all of that in mind, this is kind of the initial attempt I took at making this bag. Now I abandoned this part of it because I didn't really like the route that I was going down. And this is when I went back to the drawing board to kind of get to where we're going to be going tomorrow. So the first part here, we have the lid. So this part is just a piece of leather that has a pocket sewn onto it. And part of the problem with this is I didn't like having the leather on top. I think that that is just a little bit too much leather, and it also doesn't really make sense for the project itself. Again, going back to our canvas prototype here, having leather on the top of the bag, it just doesn't really make sense. You don't need that kind of durability, which is how I want to save or use leather in my projects. So that leather top wasn't a great idea. The way that I attached things here, also not something I really liked. Basically what we ended up doing is folding this leather edge, folding this fabric edge, and then stitching this piece of leather in between to create our hinge. Now this is very similar to how we're going to do it on the actual bag, but again, it's going to be a little bit different. I also decided to potentially move the zipper up to the front here. I'm going to make a couple different prototypes with that, see which one I like. But this one, I don't know if because I don't have the whole lid assembled here, I don't really know if it's gonna be good or bad. We also have a whole bunch of different shoulder straps ideas that I was playing around with, so they all are basically the exact same thing. It was just multiple attempts. And so what we have is a piece of 3 to 4 ounce leather, and then a piece of wool on the back, and then in between we have a bunch of neoprene. So I like this style of making straps because it doesn't involve stuffing in foam and trying to make that work. Anytime I've tried to do that, it doesn't look nice, it doesn't work well or look nice. So by going through and making straps like this, you're just making a bunch of flat pieces, you're just gluing together a bunch of flat pieces, and then you're doing a nice outside edge trim. Now, on these ones, the edge trim, everywhere else, it worked perfectly, except around the corner here. So I'm gonna try and work around this a little bit when we get on to doing the actual bag itself. But the main thing that's taught me was, for one, I don't wanna carry my neoprene all the way down to the edges. I just wanna bring it to basically the outside edge of where I'll be stitching. So outside of my seam allowance is kind of ideal. And then for this part too, for the actual making of the straps, by using leather here, and then I used what's called gross grain on the edges, which is basically just a trim piece for the inside of bags. This does work, but I think it takes away from the fact that we have really nice leather here, and then this kind of nylon material on the outside. What I would prefer to do is actually swap these. So what my plan is for the actual bag is we're probably gonna stick with either wool or fleece on the underside, and then on the top side, we're gonna do like Cordura fabric, and then the edge trim here is gonna be made from leather. And I think that's gonna give us a better overall look and probably better functionality, because that leather edge is gonna be a very durable edge. It's gonna do well rubbing against your clothing. So that was a very good lesson learned on those 3 separate pieces there. And then for the back panel, I still kind of like this back panel. I still got to decide if this is the way that I want to do it on the actual bag, because basically what we have here again is we have a flat sheet of 1000 denier Cordura. That's going to be our main backer panel. And the reason we're using this, even though it's an interior panel where we probably normally use like our liner material, we're using 1000 denier Cordura because it's just tougher. It's going to hold those stitches better. It's just a more durable material. And so this would be the inside face of that back panel. There's then going to be a pocket that's on here that we're going to then put foam in later on to add some rigidity to the thing. But the foam that we have on the back is just purely for making it comfortable to wear. So we have 3 pieces of foam here, all just glued down to that piece of Cordura. And then on top of that, we have our wool pieces, same as on the straps, because originally that's what I wanted to use for the exterior part of the bag, the part that kind of rubs on your clothing, on your body, whatever, because I find that this is a lot nicer feeling compared to something like spacer mesh. I'm not a huge fan of spacer mesh in general, so this I figured was a better idea, but I might also end up going for fleece, depending on kind of how I want the bag to look. But I do really like the way that these look. Then with this back panel, the idea going forward would be we have all these pieces now on here, and then we'd fill in all of these little gaps all along here with leather strips. And this idea is actually really good. The only thing that would make me abandon this piece right now is the fact that if I decide to use this wool, then we can actually use this back piece. If I decide not to use the wool, then we have to remake this piece, and that's basically it. Other than that, I really did like the way this back panel came together, and it does work almost perfectly for what I'm kind of looking for in this bag. And I think the overall idea of stitching down my leather pieces in here to create that overall back panel shape is going to add a lot of rigidity to this while also making it just look very cool. So one of the things I'm really trying to do on this bag that I haven't done on a lot of the bags in the past is I'm trying to really go through and reiterate things or redesign parts as needed, regardless of whether I've made nice things or not. A perfect example of that is I've already gone through and made the top lid that I thought was going to be the original top lid, but we ran into a few different problems. So I'll walk you through them here because most of them, they're very nitpicky. Some of them are kind of, I don't know, some of them make sense, but some of them are just a little bit nitpicky. So overall, again, this follows the exact same shape as our little canvas model here, but it's made from that 1000 denier cordura on the outside. We've got some 400 denier ripstop on the inside. We've got this nice leather trim, some nice leather detailing on here. Overall, I actually really like the way this came out, but there's a few key problems with it, in my opinion. So first off is the overall shape. So what I realized when I put this whole thing together is that these outside wings are gonna do exactly what they're doing right now. They're just gonna wanna flop outside of the bag, and it's gonna make the profile of this bag look really stupid. Then also on the front, where we've used these leather details, so what I used here was some 6-ounce chrome tan leather that I tried to thin down a little bit. It didn't really work, and so this top square here actually has my logo on it. I thought that it would work a lot better than it didn't really come through. It is visible, but you have to be like 2 inches away from it to actually see the logo. So what we're gonna be doing is replacing all the leather on this project with some vegetable tan leather, which is a little bit more expensive, but also should be kind of nice to work with, which means we're gonna be dyeing all of our own leather. We can actually do some real embossing on it, which is gonna be cool. All around, I'm just very excited to kind of work with some veg tan leather because I haven't worked with it enough to really know whether it's great or bad kind of thing. But yeah, we're gonna be replacing the leather, so we'll be able to do a much cooler looking patch on the front. Actually, in the new design, what I did is I brought this whole piece of leather, I brought it up into kind of an arch, and that's where we're gonna put my logo on there. So we're just gonna have a singular piece of leather up on the front here, and I think that's gonna look a lot better. And again, going back to what I said earlier about how in my brain I have an idea of what I want, or I have like images of what I want in my brain, this is one of those details that I don't have in there. I'm not gonna know how this is actually gonna look or what's gonna look good here until I kind of have that final piece. And that's where this is gonna be a lot about just making those redesigns and iterating on what we've done previously to just continue on making cool things. So it's something that it's a process that I actually really like, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to start making these videos, because so much of what I do in my projects happens as kind of a last minute decision or a redesign to a design that I already had, and you can't always fit talking about that into one of the big condensed videos or one of the really condensed videos that I do. So by doing these videos, I can actually talk about some of these more random things. But then the final part of the lid is the liner part. So initially what I did with the liner is I made 2 of these. So these canvas pieces, I made 2 of this exact same shape, and then I put them together. And what I found is that our liner material has just way too much bulk to it. It doesn't sit nice and flat in the seams. It doesn't look good. So like our outside, we have nice tight fitting edges. Everything comes together really nicely. But on the inside, it's just very loose and floppy and very wrinkly, and that to me doesn't look good. So again, when we get to doing the lid, we're gonna be redesigning this so that our liner is about, I think I did about 1/4 inch smaller than our outer pieces, and that way when you stitch the 2 together, there is space in there for everything to kind of get tightened up, for everything to get pulled together, and that way it actually looks a lot more, I don't know, it looks a lot more intentional. Whereas here, you know, this would be functional in my opinion, right? Because we only have the 1 pocket on the back. This would be a very functional lid. I think it would work just fine. But I think that by going through and just changing up the size of those liner pieces, making the lid overall a little bit more intentional in its design, it's gonna look a little bit better overall. So honestly, it's all about, again, going through and looking at the problems, you know, trying to make something, looking at the problems, and then redesigning it to then be something that is a lot more functional and mostly just looks better. Because again, this is functional, but it doesn't look good. And that is a big problem when you're gonna be spending this much time and money on a bag. You want it to look really good in the end. All right guys, so that is going to do it for today. On Sundays, I don't really have a whole bunch of time that I can spend in the shop because I work a much longer shift at my job. So unfortunately, this is gonna be it for today. But tomorrow we're gonna be diving right into this bag project. I'm really excited to get into it because as you guys have seen, I've been spending a lot of time prototyping parts, and I'm going into this project with way more thought and planning and intention than I've ever gone into any other project with. And I'm very excited about that. And kind of going throughout this whole project, what we're gonna be doing is as we make a piece, if it doesn't work for the design of the bag, if it doesn't fit either what I have in my head or it doesn't work the way that I thought it would work, then we're gonna go through, we'll redesign it, we'll remake it, and we'll kind of keep going from there. And that's gonna be the most exciting part about this project, in my opinion. And it's my favorite part about working in the shop in general, is as you find a problem, you find a solution for the problem, and then you keep on going. So yeah, I'm very excited for this bag. So I hope you guys will join me tomorrow for the start of that bag project. And yeah, we're gonna get going on probably not the most exciting part of that bag, but also probably the most complicated part of that bag. So as always, guys, I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you in the next one.